Welcome to Blockchain Security Series, the podcast where the future of Web3 security unfolds. Presented by pablito.eth.
Hello and welcome. I am Pablo Sabbatella, your guide through the intricate and evolving world of blockchain security. Each episode we dive deep into the heart of Web3, bringing you face-to-face with the pioneers and key players shaping the blockchain security ecosystem. Presented by Blockfence. Hello everyone, welcome to the 5th episode of Blockchain Security Series. Today we have Daniel von Fange, smart contracts at Origin Protocol. How are you, Daniel? How's everything?
Going very good. Enjoyed seeing a little bit of eclipse yesterday.
Where are you located? If you
East
can
Coast,
say.
United States. Yeah. So, but I've learned a new trick. I can hold a pair of binoculars, pointing over my shoulder, look at the eclipse with that, and then it projects the sun down on the ground in front of me. So, got to see it without staring at it.
I did that with my kids, I think that 1 or 2 years ago. It was funny that yesterday there was a spike in Google searching for why do my eyes hurt? Why can it be? So, welcome. Thank you for being here. I would like to start by asking you, like, what's your story in computers, security, crypto, smart contracts? How did you get here?
Well, it had been always a dream of mine to program, and as a kid, I got this giant book on programming. But I was maybe 7 years old at the time and didn't really understand it. My only achievement was to write this was back in the days of BASIC 10 beep go to 10, and so I just made a computer beep in a loop, and that was all I got until I became a teenager and actually got started programming for real. And I've always loved oceans of languages. I worked in done a lot of web applications, distributed systems, embedded systems. I've built a industrialist system that's running at the Honda car crash facility to control all the lighting for the car crash that happen there. That's almost like 3 to 4 crashes a day they run up there. And I got into, or I first encountered crypto, seeing, I think it was around the time Ethereum was released. I found an article about the EVM, and since I love playing with things, I downloaded it, did the tutorial, and then I got to the part where, like, if you want to run this code in production, you need to buy some Ethereum to run, to deploy it. And I thought, I am not spending money to run any code at all. And so I completely missed out on Ethereum at 13 cents and wasn't involved in crypto for the very first part of it. But then about late 2017, a friend of mine was starting a crypto company. And I read through the white paper and thought it was interesting and wrote a little bit of code. And at that time, I was freelancing, contracting full-time for a whole bunch of different companies, and he just said, work on it as much as you want to, and gradually over the next few years, I started working on it more and more and more until it was clearly the most fun thing I was doing, and so I finally went full-time in crypto. But so starting out, I mean, one of the first things I got to do was anti-fraud, because this was back in the airdrop days, and it was fascinating just how much fraud there was, and I built a whole set of tools around watching people try to defraud us.
And what do you think that, remembering that time, what do you think that remained the same? You know that some things in security and fraud have remained the same for 30 years and some things have changed. What do you see there, similar to that moment?
It's interesting, I guess. A change is that a lot of the airdrop fraud is extremely social, driven. There's assuming there's great big huge WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups and Telegram groups, and so it's defending against it is much less like defending against individual actors, and rather, if somebody finds one thing that works, they tell everybody they know, and then everybody tries it, and so it's like working against a giant blob, as opposed to just individual actors.
Okay, great. And now you're working at Origin Protocol. What does Origin Protocol do, and what's your role there?
Origin has a whole suite of DeFi, some DeFi products, OETH, OUSD, and Prime Staked ETH, but all basically take funds, invest them somewhere with no hassle, and you just constantly get more money. So pretty standard DeFi stuff.
And your role there is smart contracts. I mean,
yes,
development and
go ahead.
Yeah, making sure that smart contracts are developed in a secure way. So how's the process there? Maybe there we can start talking a bit about smart contract development, right? How do you plan a project?
Yes. So we have about 5 smart contract developers right now. And planning for me, I like to think of smart contracts as kind of like a pipeline for each contract that we're going to develop. And so we've got several phases in that pipeline where first you kind of need to understand what you're doing with it, and then you need to understand any code you're interacting with. And this is actually a surprisingly hard part, and probably the riskiest part of the whole thing, just because if you're interacting with another protocol, that other protocol may be 10,000 lines of code or 20,000 lines of code or something, and you'd better understand how it works. And often, something as simple as checking a balance, how much money do I have, can be an ocean of security vulnerabilities and actually very difficult to do or do right. And then, you've got coding it and testing it, and out of the entire pipeline, coding may only be 10% of the work or something. It's actually surprisingly, everything else tends to take a lot more time than that. And then we have internal code reviews by multiple people, an external audit, and then deploying it, governance, and then monitoring it afterwards. And so basically, as far as project planning goes, you kind of figure out how long each one of those is going to take for a given contract, and who's doing it, and then take all the contracts that are going to be changed for a new feature or something, and kind of line them all up, almost like a Gantt chart or something, with each one of those phases, and make sure you aren't expecting the same person to be working on multiple places, and figure out which one is the most important, the critical one that's going to set the timing for the whole thing, and make sure that that one gets priority, since it will drive the rest of the stuff.
Do you think that there's is there nowadays like a standard procedure on how should smart contracts be developed in a secure way? That do you think that the industry or most of the protocols are following, or each company, each project is doing like its own procedure, and well, sometimes that ends with a security incident, right? What do you think about that? About
I don't know that there's
standards.
A industry standard development process. I think that there are teams who are good at it, and a giant ocean of teams who are horrible at it. I think also is a lot of blue chip stuff has kind of become VC driven to some extent. At least they kind of compensate for development with lots of audits, or sometimes VCs will provide a little bit of security expertise early on in the process, and that does help the overall outcomes. But I think somebody said we are a deeply unserious industry, and that's probably true. It's there's a tremendous amount of people doing things that will obviously cause them problems.
Do you think that we are not serious, or that it's a very young industry yet? Or given the size that we have, we shouldn't be doing some things the way we do them?
I think very few other industries would trust immense amounts of resources on people who've never done it before, or there's a tremendous sense of YOLO, I guess, across the entire industry, and a lot of that is from the youth of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the first thing to go deep, how to review code.
To me, this is one of the core things that we kind of build our security around. To me, a team should own its own security. Auditors will miss things. Even fantastic auditors will miss things. And at the end of the day, an auditor is going to take a look and then leave. And so the real security of the code really should belong to the team, is the team's responsibility, and the team can do a better job than anyone else, in my opinion. And so code review is a core part of that. One of the reasons for that is if you have multiple people on your team reviewing the code, knowledge about how to write smart contract, good code spreads between people. So if I'm reviewing some code that somebody wrote, I can learn a new trick. I can see, this guy did this and that actually worked out really well, made this cleaner, and then I can use that for my code. Similarly, other people can use that, use stuff that I write. So we have two people review each piece, do a thorough review on each piece of code. The other reason for security, serious code review is not just glancing through code, is that we're in one of the most dangerous industries out there for writing code, and just in terms of there's immediate financial implications for any bug. And so you just have to have it correct. And code reviews are probably the most dollar efficient way of ensuring correctness. Correctness is never something you're guaranteed, but you get to move towards correctness fastest with code review, in my opinion. So it's something that should be a part of every single thing. And lastly, a big part of our code review is not just, is this code correct, but is it as simple as possible? Because I think it's really fairly true that the number of bugs you have is basically the square of the size of your code. And so if you double the amount of code, you quadruple the amount of bugs. And so in the long run, and particularly for a protocol that continues to evolve and continues to upgrade, repeatedly making sure everything that goes into it is as simple as possible has tremendous payoff in the long run in being able to continue to work with it and continue to not have bugs. Do you want the story on how I do a code review?
Excellent. Yeah, I like that.
I can tell you how I do a code review too, if you want a whole nother set of
we
things.
can.
Not just
Yeah,
one.
please.
Yeah. Okay. So for me on a code review, it'll often be like a 3-day process for a PR or something. And so I'll start out by reading it and trying to get the big picture of the code. Just, first read through anything that stands out as a problem. I'll make a comment on, maybe make some diagrams or something to figure out how it all works, and kind of load the whole picture of the code in. I guess stepping back to the kind of the whole point of code review to me, I classify bugs in kind of 3 categories. There's stupid bugs, like you forgot to authenticate something. There's the classic bugs, like a reentrancy exploit or something. And then there's the really, really deep, difficult bugs that come because the system's more complicated than you thought and things just don't work the way you thought. And so the goal is to get rid of all 3 kinds of those bugs. And the first 2 bugs, the simple bugs and the bugs that everybody writes, a checklist helps tremendously with finding them. So just basically have a checklist of bugs, and you go through and you check your contract against those bugs. Just like, does every single method have that is external? Should it be external? Does every external method have the right permissions on who can call it? Just kind of work through a great big checklist on that.
Have you published that checklist?
It's open source. I don't know that
Nice.
It's very specific to our own code base, but Yeah, I could
So
probably make it more public.
every code base should have its own checklist for doing these code reviews.
Yeah, in my opinion, every team should have a checklist.
Okay, excellent. And when you are, sorry for the interruption, but for when you're doing this kind of work, do you use some specific tooling, like dev tooling or security tooling, or most of this work is done manually?
I use Slither. We have Slither actually as a part of our, every PR runs through Slither. We have the low priority ones turned off and some of the mediums, but that's a real fast thing that if you ever write an obvious bug, it won't even let you merge the PR and will show a big red X in GitHub until you've gone in and marked it that it's actually safe or evaluated it. But for a code review, no. My biggest thing for code review is I love to work off paper, and so I have a script that removes all comments, which is kind of a way of removing all preconceptions about what the code does. Just makes the functions bold, and then I just format out two things on a piece of paper or two columns, and then print out the code, and then go to town with pencils and markers and doodle and everything. It lets me use spatial memory and have whole code in front of me instead of just a screen's worth of code at a time.
I had never heard this thing about removing the comments, but I think it's key now that you say it, so that you are not you're not thinking the same way as the person who wrote it. So
exactly.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I interrupted you. So that was the first part. Then
no problem. Yeah. So I'm always interested in what's the actual real constraint that you're really trying to optimize for. And so in code review, what I'm really trying to optimize for is finding these super deep bugs. And so what I've built my process around is getting it so that I have the entire system in my head at the end of it in order to be able to think about and reason about these bugs. So that's why I start with simple read through and kind of understanding, and then going through a checklist. And as I'm going through the checklist, every checklist item I'm reviewing, I'm going through the code and kind of building my picture of it. And then the next step for me is invariance, the things that always need to be true. And so basically I'll just write down, or I'll look at every state variable and compare it against the other state variables and see what needs to be true. For example, like if the amount of money in each account needs to equal the total supply, or if the assets you have always need to be a bigger number than the amount of tokens you have, or things like that. And then I'll go through each one of those and check the code that it actually is that way. And then I'll go through and sort of think like an attacker at that point, and basically write out under what circumstances would the code break. If this were true, then you could steal the money. And then once I've written out a whole bunch of those, I actually write out, if this is true, then this terrible thing can happen, but it's not true because of this. And then I go through and check each one of those, it's not true because of this, against the actual code. That sometimes surprises me. I rather than just checking each attack, it's also checking my understanding of the system, because if what I said because of this, maybe it's blocked by something else, but then I learned that I didn't quite understand how it worked. And so at that point, hopefully, I'm actually able to find the really tricky bugs kind of by that point. And then from there, it's not nearly as dramatic or exciting, but the whole deploy process and upgrade process is also just as important. You can completely screw things up with configuration. And then I like to just fork test it, even though all of our stuff has fork testing sort of unit tests that run up against the code. I just like to play with the new deploy, and it's surprising what you can find doing that.
I remember something you said at DeFi Security Summit. The single most under-recognized danger in crypto, upgrading a running protocol, right?
Yes.
So I really liked that talk. I think it was excellent. It was very, very clear, very clear. I would like you to I would like us to talk about that.
Okay, fire away with some questions on that from that you have.
No, basically your recommendations, like what's the checklist or the recommendations for upgrading a running protocol, right? I think that you have put some examples about Aave and Compound that had issues, even when they have done things, let's say by the book or not. I don't know. I don't remember exactly. But what would be your key recommendations for upgrades, and also for planning upgrades, doing the upgrades, and also this thing about should we have upgradability in a smart contract? Should we have time locks? Should this work with a multisig? Should we do it for these functions but not for these other ones?
Yes. All right. That last one is a fun, contentious topic, so I'll come to that last. But I think the key thing that Aave and Compound missed on those two things that they had problems with is they had audited code by multiple people, but they had not fork tested, or they had not verified that the whole upgrade process actually worked, which is different than the code, because you have, as I said in the talk, it's not just the code, but it's the code plus the state plus all the other contracts that it interacts with. And so what you really need to do is you need to have an atomic upgrade that at one moment everything happens, and then you need to have very much tested that one moment, that things work after it how they should, and that nothing breaks during it. So fork tests are absolutely amazing for that, and I think a huge part of it. But a lot of it is just moving from a code is everything point of view to looking at the whole system. And kind of since our contracts have gone with DeFi, as what's hot has changed and stuff, and we're trying to take stuff off the users, or you have the code take burden off the users, we end up upgrading a lot. So I've worked with since I've been doing security, we've built things from 0 to 300 or 0 to like 36 million, 0 to 200 million, and 0 to 380 million. And we've done, I don't know, 60 upgrades maybe by this point, and not lost anything in doing it. So it's definitely something that is possible to do right, but it's definitely a tricky thing.
Nice. Then you're part of SEAL, the Security Alliance, as me. So you are on one side developing smart contracts and doing it in a secure way. And when you're part of SEAL, you are seeing lots of security incidents, right? And that gives you also lots of experience. So here I would like to go into two things. Like first, how to understand the hack, right? What's your experience in that? And then what do you think about attackers? Are they very intelligent and smart people? Are they stupid? Are there different cases?
Well, let's start with that second question last, because it's a very fun one, or first because it's a very fun one. When you read articles, attackers look very smart, because you read an article that says that somebody stole this much money from this protocol and it was a sophisticated attack. But if you actually look at what's actually going on to the blockchain, the ones who are successful are kind of the exceptions to the rule. They're the ones who make it through, but there's a whole frothing bunch of people who are not that smart. And your average attacker is not actually that smart. Some of this just comes down to, just because you found a bug doesn't mean that you know how to execute it well, or that you know how to get away with the money afterwards and not be traced or anything like that. And so just on that execution level, you see people who deploy code that has debugging statements in it, and you see people make an attack but run out of gas because they didn't set the amount of gas correct. You see people deploy attacks that they've never apparently tested, and so fail because they forgot something in the middle of it. And one time I saw somebody try to build up, in real time, transaction by transaction, try to learn how to do flash loans, and they were doing it every single compile. They would actually deploy to mainnet and spend at first like $100 deploying and then running this thing, and then fail, and then make a tiny change. But then once they actually got flash loans working, they were flash loaning at least $1 million, maybe more, and paying the fees on it. And so they were spending like $1,000 every contract deploy, like every 5 minutes that they had another bug in it. It was pretty unreal to watch. I guess another example of a bad attack is I published a tweet on a set of tweets on read-only reentrancies affecting balance transfers. And like the next day, somebody tried to attack our smart contracts with a read-only reentrancy bug. But our smart contracts were protected against read-only reentrancy bugs, and so the attack completely failed. But I mean, somebody paid money to deploy code to mainnet, and it was never going to work, and it didn't work, and they tried it and failed attacking. So yeah, there's just it's easy to have a perception that everybody's smart on the bad guy side, but the reality is, just like there's the majority of smart contract developers are not that good at their job. The majority of attackers are actually bad, and if they even pull off an attack, are likely to get caught.
And do you think that's because attackers are not sophisticated, or perhaps because you have a dev looking for code and he hasn't thought that he's not looking to hack a protocol, right? He's just looking for code, or perhaps within a bounty or whatever. And then he finds something and he says, okay, I'm going to try to steal this money. And he's not prepared for that, right? So there they also have many OPSEC issues, right? Like you have been seeing the GitHub code, or you have been in the Discord of the protocol and you have used your own IP or whatever, and they leave traces everywhere.
Yep. It's breaking something is easier in some extent because when you break it, and you can just keep wailing at it until you do. Whereas not being found requires you don't know when you've made a mistake, and it's
very complicated to remain anonymous in blockchain. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the other day I was talking with a friend also. I was telling him that I think that, I don't know, in 15, 20 years, like cryptography that we are using nowadays will be broken. So for example, all the transactions that are nowadays being done in Tornado Cash, all those things are being stored on chain. In 15 or 20 years, we will know who was each person, right? So I told him, if you want to do something really, really anonymous, it's not so easy, right? And most, if you're thinking ahead in lots of time. So, okay. And do you think that also sometimes bounty programs or platforms where you have this kind of contacts that, I see lots of times security auditors criticizing because sometimes they report some bugs or whatever, and some companies reject them or say, okay, this was not a medium, this is a low. And sometimes you see that thing is repeated more than once with a specific project, and I always think that those kind of things are maybe converting a white hat into a black hat, right? Because everything is about incentives, but also sometimes perhaps someone is not happy with the protocol itself, and they say, okay, you don't want to pay me for this. I will put lots of effort in doing something wrong here. That is not only harming the protocol, obviously, but lots of users. So what do you think about that, about the mind of the attacker?
Yeah. Well, I think bug bounty programs are one of the great steps forwards in crypto, in particular Immunify, that's made it really easy for a project to host one, really easy to report to lots of projects, and kind of provides a little bit of kind of like a third-party judge if things go wrong. I think that the normalization of paying big bug bounties in crypto has really driven a lot of hacks, or made a tremendous amount of hacks not happen. It's been a tremendously economic beneficial thing for the ecosystem as a whole. Just because instead of losing $100 million, you might pay a $1 million bug bounty. And, that's a tremendous win for every single person involved. And I think has been, one of the reasons why the amount of dollars stolen has been going down over time, is a lot of stuff happens in bug bounties now. That said, there are problems with it. And on a bug bounty side, I work with both responding to bug bounties from the project side and sometimes submitting bug bounties in. And so I get to see it from both points of view. And again, there's a lot of projects that aren't good at responding, will look for any way not to pay. On the other hand, there are good projects will aggressively pay, sometimes even when they aren't technically required to. I've had somebody send me money for something I just contacted somebody on Telegram about, and it didn't even turn out to be a bug, or an actual problem. And so, on the whole, it's definitely wonderful. In any individual instance, because hopefully we don't have very many serious bugs. Occasionally we've had people report interesting behaviors that we're not going to lose money, but were something we knew about, and we've been happy about that. But for the most part, as a project, which most of your life as a project is that you're getting bug reports that are not true. Just like some, let's say even 50% are just complete garbage spam, and then some of them are things that you already knew about, or just really aren't things you would be just fine never having been contacted with. And so I think that kind of cycle where there's so many bad reports also makes projects, their first action is, I'm going to dismiss a bug report because you've gotten, the last 90%, 95% of them have been not true. So it's definitely, there's still a lot of room in that area for it to be better for both bug reporters and projects, but it's definitely come a long way. And I have seen people white hat hack a protocol and the protocol was really happy to get 90% of the funds back, and whereas they would have only paid a 10% bug bounty. But that's or not a 10% bug bounty, but a tiny fraction of what they actually ended up paying after somebody hacked them to get their funds back. And that's extremely legally risky for the person doing that, even though, maybe it saved the project that money from somebody else doing it first. And, the person did go into it aggressively intending to give the money back to the project and, take care of the users and stuff.
Yeah, in that case, I think that something very interesting was the White Hat Safe Harbor Agreement that SEAL started developing and protocols agreeing to it. I think that's key because in the same way that an attacker, we say an attacker can be detected, can be traced, and can have legal issues. If you have a white hat that can have similar issues, we have a problem, right? So I think that it's very, very good to start having those kind of industry-wide agreements. So now that we are talking about that, and before going to the how to understand the hack, now that we are talking about bounties and devs, I have a question. What do you think, and what's your opinion regarding insider threats, right? In Web2 security, when we see security incidents in traditional companies, we see that there are lots of insider hacks and ex-employees. What do you think about that in the crypto industry? What do you and related to that, what do you think about, for example, about having anonymous developers, right? Something related to what happened with Munchables 10 days ago, approximately. And also related to this, what do you think about bounties for employees? Should an employee get a bounty if he finds, for example, a security bug in production? What do you think
Okay.
about the code?
So I think
It's a difficult question.
probably not on the last question, as much as it pains me. But could you ask me the first part of that question again? Sorry.
The first question is, what do you think about insider threat?
Okay, yes,
right?
insider threat. So this is something that I'm always assuming that I'm compromised or my devs are compromised, not even, my coworkers, not even anything malicious, but just, it could be submitting bad code. So that's where the whole process of having multiple reviewers, it's not that one person writes code and ships that code. Other people are reviewing both the code has been built, and then we have GitHub, or Git signatures on that code, and then reviewing the code that's actually deployed. Have a whole process, just like we have a whole process for reviewing code, have a whole process for reviewing deployed code, that what's actually been deployed actually matches what we all reviewed and agreed on beforehand. It's given the nice, clean, atomic nature of blockchain code and how easy it is to actually verify stuff afterwards, that it exactly matches the source code. And every single action that takes place on contracts can be viewed later. It makes it much easier than a Web 2 world to actually defend against insider threats. Now, in the case of was that Munchables or whoever, all of their people were the same guy. And so that's not, it kind of goes out the window in that case once your entire team is bad guys. But it's something I think about and something we try to build our processes to handle in a way that anything would be noticed. Multi-sigs are fantastic. Time locks are great. At a minimum, a multi-action, multi-sig, where you fire off multiple actions from a single transaction, allows multiple people to verify what's going to happen before it happens and exactly what's going to happen. So that's a tremendous step forward versus just an EOA. But yeah, we have a whole governance system with voting and stuff.
And so regarding that, what do you think about a team that has anonymous developers? That perhaps, I don't know, imagine that you have a team and in your team you have people that you know who they are, that's something, but then the public doesn't know, that's the case. But then you have teams where each other don't have an idea of who is the other person. What do you think about that? Should we care about that? Or as the code is open source, we should not care about that? The same way we do not care who Satoshi Nakamoto is because the code is there.
Well, one of the things, since I came into crypto in late 2017 or something, it was a very small, almost uncool, thing, and there wasn't huge incentives to infiltrate projects. It was just a bunch of people doing things, and so I think the likelihood of organized infiltration of projects is going up over time, and probably will continue to go up. In the past, I still don't think it's a project or a problem to have some anonymous people on a team, as long as it's not to the point where everyone is, or where they would be able to push things through themselves, I guess.
Okay, nice. And what about bounties for employees? Imagine you are an employee in a company, you find the bug and you say, okay, if I report this, they are already paying me for this, so I will not get anything. So I could do that, or I could send it to a friend, so a friend reports this and it's fixed. Or they could also turn into being black hats, just because perhaps they are not aligned with the company, or they are not happy for whatever reason. And how do you also think that this affects the fact that the size of teams, right? in general, DeFi protocols are small, and I think that this is perhaps one of the reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, I found bugs that have gone through auditors before, so this is, a not just an academic
Something that
question.
happens. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I would generally stay away from it because you really don't want to give anybody an incentive to add bugs to your code, and you really don't want to give a team incentives to add bugs and split the payout later. So I just figure I'm getting paid to have secure code get out the door, and so anything that doesn't, if something got out the door that wasn't secure, then that's my problem. Or, yeah.
I agree. Now, you were just talking about code review, and 1 week ago or 10 days ago, I don't remember, was the XC backdoor in our Linux versions. Like, what do you think about that? Like, it was very, very sophisticated. Like, they had been doing like small upgrades in different codes for like 2 years, I think it was. What do you think about that? What failed there, or what should change in order for that kind of things not to happen again? And in fact, that thing was detected, but now that we see it, we there could be like lots of them, lots of backdoors running in any Linux system or any system nowadays, right? What do you think that should change, or that could have been done there to avoid this kind of risks?
So that's another area that I think crypto has a lot of advantages over Web 2 stuff and Web 0 stuff and operating systems, every other kind of code, in that you can do useful work in 200 lines of code or something. And the EVM is is inherently incredibly deterministic. And so in that area, we're playing on easy mode in comparison to the rest of computing civilization. We can actually know what's going to happen, and actually know it's, entirely possible for one person to know every single thing that's going to happen for a given contract system or something. Whereas it's not even close to possible for you to know what's going to happen when you launch an executable on a computer or something. So I don't have answers for the open source world there, other than to recognize that it's a problem. And it's always terrified me, the size of NPM dependencies in projects, just because that seems like such an attack avenue when there's thousands of projects that get included into everything.
Yeah, and also because it's also a risk for our industry, because we are running on top of all that.
Yep. Yes.
And I mean, every developer that perhaps said, no, I run Linux, I don't have any security issues. You didn't have any. You thought you didn't have any security issues.
Yep. But again, we can actually verify what we've got. At the end of the day, you can go rip the bytecode off the chain and see what's actually deployed there. You can rip a governance proposal off the chain, and you can see that, this set of code is changing to that set of code, and actually know what's going on, which is a wonderful thing.
Great. So now let's go back. How to understand an attack? Whenever you see an attack, or perhaps there's an alert or a new report in SEAL, from where do you start? How is your whole process, step by step?
Yes. That depends a bit on how much information you have. If particularly whether an attack has already happened or it hasn't happened yet. If it has already happened, the easiest way is to just work through the attack and figure out, usually the goal of that is to figure out where the bug is. And so we usually load the transaction as something that's not Etherscan, either into Blockfence team's Falcon tool. There's OpenChain, that's a little tool by Sam CZ Sun, or tenderly. And then usually in attack, there's a whole bunch of code before and after the attack that you can kind of ignore because it's getting money for flash loans or exchanging coins into the right kind that's needed for the attack, or later exchanging coins in what's going to be stolen. So usually you can kind of narrow out, like drop out like a third of the code pretty quickly at that point. And then you just kind of want to see what the attacker is doing, and you sort of find where it goes weird and then work your way backwards from there. Find where all of a sudden the attacker has more money or something they shouldn't have, and then go back to try to find out how they got it through what they did. Something that's fairly useful in that is like Tenderly's gas flame graph, where you see how much gas things are in, or both Falcon and OpenChain will show you how much gas is used, because oftentimes, if you just see a list of calls or something, you may not know where the real work happens. And one of them may have used 4 million in gas, and probably something very interesting happened inside that. So that can help you narrow down to where stuff is actually happening.
Excellent. And are there any war rooms or security incidents you remember that were different from the rest, or where
Yes.
you learned something new?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go with different from the rest. So some war rooms, and fortunately fewer nowadays. It used to be most war rooms were just somebody's been hacked and you're just trying to figure out what's going on and if there's any money left that can be saved. And so focus mostly on understanding the hack and just picking up the pieces. But it's not the money's already gone. But one of the exciting war rooms from a few years ago, somebody noticed that an attacker had deployed an attack contract and let me know, and we could see what was being attacked, and we could see that the attack had not run yet, but we could see the contract had been deployed, but the contract was not verified at all, and so it was just bytecode, and so got another person in, and the two of us went through in a race against the attacker, because the attacker is trying to figure out why his attack's not working, why his transaction would fail when he should submit it. And we're trying to race to figure out what is being attacked and how it's working. And so we actually won that race, figured out that it was an old stablecoin that still had several millions in it. But they actually got it paused. And the attacker, we figured out what the bug was all inside like 30 minutes or something. The pause happened much sooner. And all the funds were saved. So I guess that's an example of attackers being stupid, because he deployed code that had a bug in it. We figured out what the bug was too. But by the time he actually fixed the bug, the money was safe.
Do you usually also, there are two ways of perhaps detecting an attack before it happens, like seeing code that has been just deployed, like, okay, this address received funds from Tornado and deploy the contract, so that's something to see. But do you also see cases where the attacks are being first played in testnet, so you detect them first because they were run in testnet first?
Well, no. There's actually very few protocols that actually have their setups in testnets. So at least I've never actually seen an attack detected in a testnet before.
Okay, I asked you this question because last week I had a talk with a friend, and he told me about this. And he told me, many attacks are being detected like this. And I said, I have never seen it. But
well, maybe what he's talking about is mempool, in the mempool, or somebody's submitted an attack but it's not ran, because that is the other thing that is increasingly happening nowadays, and many attackers actually never even profit from their attack, because a mev bot will swoop in and run the attack themselves instead of the attacker doing it. And the mev bots are now smart enough that if a smart contract will actually steal money, they'll actually run the attack themselves, often on even when the contract's deployed before it's ever even run or tried to run. And fortunately, several of the people are, there's at least one good guy mevbot out there who will get money back to a project afterwards, which is fantastic.
Excellent. No, he was referring to testnet, not to the mempool, like Forta does, for example. That I really like that. The thing that I think that we're missing there is, for example, I remember the Euler hack that Forta detected it, I don't know, like 6 minutes before.
Yep.
But that time was not enough to alert the team anything. So like we need more automation there. But at the same time, like these tools still have lots of false positives, right? So you cannot be pausing the protocol like all the time. And they are perhaps very gameable.
I think it's that false positive ratio is one of the things that it's hard to know because it's easy to show that you had a detection afterwards, but it's much harder to you can't actually get numbers from detection people about false positives. And so in theory, there's definitely classes of things you should be able to get fairly low false positive ratios on. If a mevbot can steal the money, if you can steal the money to your own address, that's a pretty certain that it's a legit attack.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, what do you think about the people that say code is law? So the contract was there. There was a vulnerability that was in the code. I did something. The contract allowed me to do that. I think for me it's okay. They say. What do you think about that? Is code law?
I don't think so. I think that on the one hand, we should have an infrastructure that allows whatever code to operate, and that free basically from censorship or so we should have a base layer at the code layer. The code should be able to run sort of in code is law-ish world. But at the layer above that, if you steal money, that's still theft, and it's just if there's not like worldwide global censorship that keeps me from going over to my neighbor's house and stealing the bicycle. The universe won't stop me from doing that. But on the other hand, if I actually do go over there and steal the bicycle, then I'm a thief, and there can be legal consequences for that and stuff. So I guess that probably puts me outside the code is law camp. If you're stealing stuff, you're stealing stuff. But
totally.
I still Ave Eisman or whatever's tweets about over the last weekend we executed a highly profitable trading strategy.
Yeah,
just cracks me up to no end and is as funny as all get out. And in spite of my disagreement, I would call that one yes, not just trading, but anyway.
Totally. Now, what do you think are the Pareto law, the 80-20, like
yes,
some small things or some things that you can do that have the greatest impact. So what do you think are like the small things or things that people or devs mostly focusing, both in devs and users, things that they do not put so much focus on, and there are small or simple things that have a great impact in security?
Yeah, I think fork tests are probably the just mind-boggling superpower that we have in crypto that almost no other kind of coding actually has, and is very easy to use. And a little bit of time with that can save you from a lot of stupid things. I think a lot of times people come to code review with the idea that you're just going to scroll through the code once and then say that looks good. But I think having a way to spend more time on the code, just taking different approach after different approach after different approach on reviewing a piece of code tremendously ups how much you find during a code review.
Nice. What do you think about the state of tooling for secure development nowadays? Do you think that devs already have all the tools that they need to develop in a secure way, or it's not a matter of having more tools, but having more processes or doing things the way that should be done, and we don't need more tools.
Yeah. So when I got started again in like 2018 or so, writing smart contracts, I thought about making like a T-shirt for myself that was a pie chart, and there'd be like 5% of it was doing useful work, and let's say 10%, and then 45% of it was fighting bugs in MetaMask, and 45% of it was fighting bugs in whatever the smart contract deployment system we used at the time was. And so from there, we've moved so far, although it's kind of hard to where, we'll spend maybe 2 days getting a new developer up to speed or something on the environment. But then beyond that, it doesn't feel like the tools are actively holding us back. And so now I don't know how much of that's just because I've gotten used to the space and how much of it is actually that much better, but it feels like we've moved out of the world where all the tools are broken all the time into a world where you can productively get work done. And so anything from here feels like it's just getting adding productivity instead of just fixing things that are horribly broken. I love, on the adding productivity side, I love just how fast tests run in Foundry, for example, is something that actually does add a bit of productivity, just being able to have things run that fast as you work.
Any thoughts on AI for secure development or for smart contract security audits? Have you tried anything? Do you think it's too basic up to now?
I think, if you point an LLM at contracts that people have spent a tremendous amount of time examining for security bugs, the odds of it actually coming up with a valid bug are, tiny fractions of a percent, to the point that even just chasing down what the LLM says is probably a net negative on, is is not a productive use of your time. LLMs and like Visual Studio Code plugins and stuff do allow people to write smart contract code much faster. And so as a security guy who hates actual and is scared of every single line of code, this is like my enemy, which is lines of code, is coming at me even faster than ever before. And so at this point, the LLMs are definitely helping the writing code more than the securing code.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what do you think are the most interesting things that you're seeing happening in the security field in blockchain? Like, it can be a project, or it can be some kind of new technology, or monitoring, or automation, or have you seen anything in particular? You are mostly
I still think bug bounties are probably the biggest security innovation of the thing that has changed how security works over the past 2 years. And that's if you are committed to having a secure protocol and you have a good bug bounty and you're writing bugs, you converted. There's some odds that you'll just be getting bug bounties and paying out chunks, substantial chunks of money. But that's much better than losing all the protocol funds. But it still is a little bit of a feedback cycle into, I should probably spend more on security so that I'm not paying out $1 million bug bounty every couple months. And so that's allowed kind of the cost benefit on security to equalize out a little bit. So, yeah.
And now that you talk about that, do you think that there should be a closer relation between what a project is paying for a critical report for a bug bounty and the 10% that they are willing to offer a white hat or a black hat or someone when they negotiate after the hack has been already executed, or do you think that how they are being managed nowadays is okay?
That's a tricky question that I don't have an immediate answer on. I think in an ideal world, a report would pay more than a hack, because a report is far less disruptive than a hack. And maybe we'll eventually get there. I don't think that's the world we live in right now, because there's just a different set of things at stake. And it really, kind of like the wages for workers, to some extent depends on how many people want to do a particular job. There's no doubt in my mind that actually stealing funds and then collecting a bounty is massively riskier to your life than sending a bug bounty report. And so much fewer people do it, I guess, which is good.
Yeah. Okay, great. So one last question. Is there any big or funny fuck up you remember you did, or something that you now think about that, like sometimes after that, and you say, oh, I cannot believe I did this? Some mistake to remember?
Well, it wasn't code that I'd written, but at the very, this is how I became a security expert as a result of, but our first DeFi project, we launched, started getting great traction. I wrote a tiny web app that could pull stuff up on my phone and show me how much money was in it, like one page of all the stats. And so I'm just refreshing this, and people are putting $1 million a day into it. And it gets to $7 million after a week. And I'm in the kitchen doing supper, and I wash my hands, hit the phone to refresh it, and it shows an error page instead of how much money we had. And so immediately ran off and started checking, and the money was gone. And so that was the point that I decided that this was never going to happen again, and that I was going to become a security expert. And so, I actually have the true fear of code being wrong.
Okay, yeah. Well, I always say that when I was very young, when I was 15 years old, I had a hacking and security website back in 1999. And once I was hacked, right, by someone that now is a very big friend of mine. And I always say that I was lucky to be hacked when I was very, very young, because from that moment on, everything changes. You don't see things the same way, and you start thinking about security seriously.
Yep.
So I think that's very important. It's like eating. Some people wait until they have a little heart attack before start eating healthier. With security, the same happens, sadly, right? So, well, Daniel, it has been a very pleasant podcast to hear from you. I learned a lot. I think that most of the people that are listening now the same. So I'm very, very thankful for you. Anything else that you'd like to add before we finish?
Spend more than 30 minutes of code reviewing and use fork tests.
Okay. Remember that. If you keep that in mind, that's a lot. Well, Daniel, thanks a lot. This has been a great interview with Daniel von Fange, in charge of smart contracts at Origin Protocol. Thank you, Daniel, and well, hope to see you soon in some conference. Are you going to any conference this year? Which are your preferred conferences? FCC in Belgium. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see you there for sure.
You have a good one. See you. Bye.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Blockchain Security Series, the podcast where the future of Web3 security unfolds. Presented by pablito.eth.